There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamma Mia podcast.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Rebecca has a COVID-acquired brain injury. Her brainstem and frontal lobe are inflamed, and sometimes she can't remember the name of basic objects. Jeremy is bedbound. His world has been reduced to the four walls of his bedroom, and sometimes he feels paralysed. He also has tachycardia, a condition that causes a rapid heartbeat. Leon used to be loud and outgoing. Now he has to take a breath every few words. His voice has become quiet and difficult to hear. It means he can't have the conversations he used to. Georgia has had a temperature every day for a year and has developed a number of allergies that were never present before. Karina now sleeps 16 hours a night, and Charlie can no longer exercise. It's been over a year and a half. Anya starts trauma therapy next week. One day she was a healthy, functioning adult, and then she tested positive to COVID. It wasn't the COVID that was traumatic, but the sickness that persisted and the medical gaslighting she endured for months. She was made to feel like a liar, or that maybe she was going mad. Disparate symptoms coming from all over the world. What these stories have in common is that they are part of what is now considered long COVID. My name is Jessie Stevens, filling in this week for Mia Friedman, and this is No Filter. Today, my guest is Tracey Spicer. 3 years ago, Tracey was named the New South Wales Premier's Woman of the Year, accepted the Sydney Peace Prize alongside Tarana Burke for the Me Too movement, and won the National Award for Excellence in Women's Leadership through Women in Leadership Australia. Today, most of Tracey's days are spent at doctor's appointments.
I'll try to make any medical appointments I need to go to in the afternoon. So I'll then either get someone to drive me to a medical appointment or go to a medical appointment. They will completely smash me. So then I'll go and lie down and meditate again in the afternoon or do some yin yoga very gently for about 20 minutes.
She's a multiple Walkley Award winning author and broadcaster who has anchored programs all over Australia. I'm sure she didn't imagine that in July 2022, she'd be on No Filter, speaking about how she became one of the unlucky ones, a sufferer of the dreaded long COVID. Long COVID means your symptoms have persisted for longer than 12 weeks after initial infection. What's interesting though is that there might actually be new symptoms. You could feel like you're actually getting sick with something else entirely. And for some, their condition continues to deteriorate. Tracey has been sick for 204 days. And here's what she thinks you should know. Tracey, I want to start with a question that I think begins every conversation in 2022, which is, when did you get COVID and did it hit you hard?
I got COVID on the 2nd of January this year and it hit me like a freight train. I was bedridden for 2 weeks with countless symptoms. It was as if an army was marching through my body, attacking each organ in turn. I've really never experienced anything like it.
You say 2 weeks. For those first 2 weeks, what sort of symptoms are we talking about? Are we talking the cough and the fatigue and the brain fog?
This will probably resonate with a lot of people who got the Delta strain, which is what I got earlier this year. I lost my taste and smell. I had the coughing, the crippling fatigue. There were some unusual symptoms as well. I had tinnitus all the time, the ringing ears, bleeding gums, chest pains very early on. Every time I could drag myself out of bed, I got chest pains and palpitations as if my body was saying, no, you've just got to lie down. I also had skin rashes. I had something called small fibre neuropathy, which means you get a feeling like an electric shock in your extremities, and this kept happening to my right foot. It seemed as if, it was having a go at different organs one at a time.
Did you consider going to hospital, Tracey?
I considered going to hospital a couple of times, but you know what it's like. And I wonder whether this is something that predominantly affects women because traditionally we're the carers in society. I was more worried about passing it on to the teenage kids, and I was constantly, on the phone and texting them, have you got symptoms? Are you okay? I hope I haven't passed it on to you. That I kind of, in a way, put myself last and just lay in bed and thought, oh, well, if I lie down, drink a lot of water and eat vegetables, I'll get over it.
In terms of vaccination, so this was early January this year, were you double vaxxed, triple vaxxed?
I was triple vaxxed because we were going to Queensland for Christmas and I wanted to be as protected as possible. I definitely picked it up on the Gold Coast somewhere there, not quite sure where. And I think at that time in history, we had this idea that we were a lot more bulletproof with vaccinations when it came to things like long COVID. The latest research is showing it helps a little bit, but it doesn't help an awful lot when it comes to the longer manifestations.
A lot of people who have had COVID have talked about afterwards feeling quite unsure about when to get back to exercise because they're still feeling quite physically fatigued. You got back to Reformer Pilates. You went to a class at, I think quite a while after you'd been first tested positive. How did that class go?
The exercise piece is so interesting. Prior to getting COVID, I was training for a 4-day trek on Cradle Mountain in Tasmania and a 30-day walk through Sydney to raise money for a charity. I don't think I'd ever been so fit in my entire life, So that's why it was so weird that I got hit that badly with COVID. But I was keen to get back into exercise because of the training regime. However, my body was telling me, go slowly. You just can't do this. Every time I tried to take the dog, even for a 5 or 10 minute walk, my heart would start racing. So I did a few really gentle walks with the dog and gradually built up to about half an hour with her. And then honestly, 6 weeks after I had COVID originally, I tried to do a Reformer Pilates class, which I've done for about 10 years. And I started feeling like I was having a heart attack, real stabbing pains in the chest. I pulled all the springs off the Reformer machine and just pretended to do the rest of the class with everyone else, and then went home and lay down and thought, oh my goodness, I've done something terrible here. I don't know what I've done. That's why, I'm pretty vocal about advising people to take it incredibly easy when it comes to exercise because your body's simply not ready for it.
Can you tell me about the night, or rather the early morning, where you collapsed?
Yes, against my better judgment. I'd had 1 glass of wine with dinner. I really haven't been drinking alcohol for the past 6 months because I've been feeling so terrible, but it was a special occasion. And I thought I'll have a little glass of rosé with my salmon for dinner. And next thing I remember, it's 3:00 in the morning. I've got a very sore head and my husband is looming over me in the bathroom saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, are you all right? What had happened was I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I didn't realise that I have a very common manifestation of long COVID called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means when you go from lying to sitting or sitting to standing, or worst case scenario like in bed lying to standing, your blood pools in your legs and goes from your brain. Your brain forgets to tell your body to stand up and you just pass out and can crack your head. And that's what happened to me. It's seen by cardiologists as one of the less serious heart conditions you can have, but you can actually die if you pass out and hit your head. And my husband found me pale and unresponsive on the floor. He said he took a good 5 minutes to get me to come to. He seriously thought I was dead. So it was a very, very scary moment.
You mentioned POTS, and that was a term I had never heard, probably until the last 6 months, where a lot of people I know are talking about experiencing it post-COVID. What other symptoms started to manifest in the months that followed?
The main one, aside from the chest pain and the palpitations, which has lasted for months and months and months, is what's called post-exertional malaise. And malaise sounds like you're a 19th century woman and your corset's too tight and you're fainting. It's not that at all. You honestly wake up every morning after non-refreshing sleep feeling like you've been run over by a truck. And any exertion, you make your breakfast. That might take 5 or 10 minutes. You are exhausted after making your breakfast and have to lie down for half an hour. Then you might do half an hour of emails, which is cognitive exertion. And you have to rest after that mentally and physically, sometimes even just lying down in a darkened room listening to music. So what's happening in your body? With the long COVID, there's about 4 different theories, but basically the mitochondria in the cells is not working properly to produce energy. So something that might deplete your energy normally a little bit depletes it enormously. And that's why exercise is so bad at this point in time, because you are completely wrecked by even walking to the kitchen to make yourself a cup of tea.
What do you do? You've had COVID. You know it's not COVID anymore because you've recovered. What's your first step? Did you go to your GP? Did you describe the symptoms?
Yes, I went through a phase of about 3 months where I saw probably 5 different medical people and allied health specialists a week, just trying to pick their brains. We're so fortunate to have, Medicare and a relatively robust health system here in Australia. But unfortunately, a lot of the research is done overseas and we are behind when it comes to long COVID. In fact, one of the first GPs I told about this when I said I had long COVID, because being a journalist, I do a lot of research, she leapt back from me thinking that I was still contagious. I said, no, you're not going to catch anything from me. It's long COVID. So I guess I'm very disappointed in the lack of government education campaigns when it comes to the medical profession, because I know they're exhausted. They've been through hell with COVID. But there's so many people who are suffering. I'm talking about my own situation in this podcast, but my heart goes out to younger people who have this, or people who've had longer chronic conditions for decades, because it must be utterly debilitating and frustrating being gaslit by medical professionals all the time.
So when you see these GPs and you use the term long COVID, what treatments are available? What do they start suggesting you do? Is there a pill they can give you? What are your options?
It's such a good question because it speaks to the whole construct of the medical system. It's set up for either life or death. It's not set up for chronic conditions. So the first thing they do structurally is rule out the most common ailments that cause these symptoms. They will send you off for a chest x-ray, for a lung function test to see whether there's anything obviously structurally wrong with the heart. But what the latest research is showing with long COVID is it's creating microclots, which don't show up on the usual tests. So you've got all these incredibly frustrated people with long COVID who are trying to be taken seriously, getting a battery of tests. And if it's exhausting making a cup of tea, I can tell you, I went to the other side of the city today for a hospital appointment and that completely killed me. So you go for all these exhausting tests and then they find that there's nothing wrong with you, or they think there's nothing wrong with you because it's not obvious structurally. However, I understand why the medical profession has to rule out some of the more, serious, immediately life-threatening conditions. With regards to whether there's a pill or not, I've got a couple of specialists. I've been seeing the long COVID clinic at St Vincent's, and doctors are frustrated they can't just give you a pill. However, I've managed to find a few, really good progressive forward-thinking GPs who have given me 5 or 6 off-label low-dose medications that have helped about 10 to 20%. And they're things like statins to help stop the chest pain. It has stopped the chest pain. Steroidal anti-inflammatories to give you a little bit of energy to be able to work a couple of days a week, just the simple things. Some of the antidepressants really help, not because this is a psychological condition, but because there's neurological impacts from long COVID in your body, and they help a little bit as well. But aside from that, some people are talking about cannabis oil and low-dose naltrexone. I haven't tried those, but really anything you can be given is relatively experimental. However, when you feel like this, honestly, you try anything.
I'm interested in the neurological impact because, Tracey, you are a Walkley Award winning journalist. You're an author, you're a broadcaster, you're someone who's worked very, very hard across your career, and now one of the central features of long COVID is having your energy taken away. Has this impacted your cognitive function? How do you go with writing, with speaking, that sort of thing?
I got some really good advice from a colleague of mine who's a lovely woman, Sophie Scott, the health reporter for the ABC. She's been an absolute lifeline. And she was talking about how you've really got to stimulate your vagus nerve and rest before and after you work to help with the flow of the blood to the brain cognitively. So let me give you a very real world example of this. Yesterday, I had to undergo a battery of tests. And because I was standing up more than usual, the executive function of my brain was impacted, and I did the most stupid things around the house. The porridge overflowed in the morning, and I almost, wrecked the whole kitchen bench. I left our garage door open when I drove out of the house. I'm not driving very much. It tends to really cognitively wreck me. For 4 hours, anyone could have come in and robbed the house. I called one of our children the wrong name. This is the kind of cognitive stuff that happens. So then I actively did lots of meditation last night, had a massive sleep, non-refreshing sleep, but still had a massive sleep, more meditation this morning, and that filled my cup enough to be able to write one chapter of my book this morning. So what you've got to really do is focus on lying down and resting as much as possible before you have to do anything cognitively to refill that cup. Hi, I'm Tracey Spicer, and you're listening to No Filter.
I've heard a lot of discussion in the long COVID community about doctors prescribing something called graded exercise therapy. Have you heard of this, and why is it so controversial?
Oh, don't get me started. Those poor dear warriors in the myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome community have been fighting for decades to have it understood that graded exercise therapy was based on bad science. And there's a whole documentary in that I won't go into, but unfortunately, we're getting a lot of the old research here in Australia. They've actually advised against it and said it's harmful in both the UK and the US. But the Royal College of Physicians here in Australia still has it on their website that this is something that should be recommended for people with that condition and also with long COVID. So I've had it said to me by various so-called professionals that this is a good thing to do. And I'm telling you, my body is telling me this is not the right thing to do at this point in time. You've got to get a baseline of recovery before you can start pushing your body in any way. Otherwise, you go backwards. And that's not only anecdotal experience, that's peer-reviewed clinical experience. So it's heartbreaking to think Australia is that far behind. I want to say to anyone listening, if you've got long COVID or suspect you've got long COVID and someone says graded exercise therapy, be incredibly cautious, do some research and say, that's not the right thing for me at this point in time.
I wanted to ask you as well about another thing anecdotally I'm seeing in the long COVID community, which is the fact that it appears to be women of a certain age. So something is happening in terms of women being more susceptible perhaps to long COVID. What do you think it is? Are there any reasons, any theories as to why it's women who are falling ill with long COVID?
Yes, a cardiologist I saw last week who specialises in POTS and deals with a lot of female patients, he's wonderful, was talking about this intersection between not only our hormones but our mitochondria. So a lot of research is going into this at the moment, fortunately. But the problem is historically a lot of medical research was done on men's bodies because they considered that women's bodies were too unpredictable because of those pesky periods and the fact that we're childbearing creatures. Fortunately, women's bodies are being studied more now, but that's why we're so far behind on the research. What we know about long COVID is it predominantly affects more women than men overall, more women of all ages, but especially women aged between 30 and 60. Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of this and it will help a lot of people with post-viral illness or chronic conditions that are predominantly affected by women, and it'll stop the gaslighting in the medical community.
I've heard the theory, I'd be interested in your take on this, that women within that age group are also the ones who are often carrying the mental load, who are potentially more fatigued in the first place, who are working really hard. Do you think that has legs in terms of why they might be a little bit more vulnerable to something like long COVID?
It's a really interesting thought because our energy levels are depleted naturally for all of those reasons that you mentioned. I don't know whether that impacts the energy levels of the mitochondria, whether that intersects with the science. I think it's a combination of things, I really do. But on those groups, there are also men who are just as debilitated. There are also young people who don't have kids and who are equally as debilitated. So, I always tend to lean on the science in these areas. There is something going on here, and I'm optimistic that they'll find what it is in the next couple of years. I just hope too many people aren't crushed in the meantime.
What's the state of research in Australia? Because I have heard as well that we're a little bit behind when it comes to, say, the UK and the US, and maybe we're behind as well because our waves were a little bit behind, given that we went into quite conservative lockdowns. Why do you think Australia has been a little bit maybe slow when it comes to this medical research?
There are a number of reasons for that. One is a simple numbers game. There's larger populations in the UK and the US, so there's more money put into medical research because the benefits are greater. They can help a greater number of individuals. But it's also the fact, and a doctor actually told me this the other day, that a lot of conditions, particularly if you're talking about ME/CFS, POTS, mast cell activation syndrome, which is something you get in long COVID, and I had that very badly for 4 months, all of these things are predominantly impact women. And when you've had a Conservative government in power federally for so many years, there's a political lens that's put over funding for medical research. So a lot of money went to pet projects of the people who were in power. And a lot of those pet projects aren't going to be projects that help women when you have a Conservative government. So I'm hoping now that we've got a progressive government in power federally that more money will be put towards conditions that impact women predominantly, including long COVID.
What happens if that doesn't happen? If there isn't funding, if it isn't a priority, if it continues to be something that we don't really talk about publicly, what is your fear for the future in regards to long COVID?
We will have new generations of people living with disabilities if nothing is done about long COVID. We will have enormous labour shortages in the next couple of years, and we will have an overwhelmed health system where people simply cannot cope. I mean, look at what's happening in the health system now. There are so many people with COVID at the moment. They can't get enough staff. And then you've got this extra layer of long COVID and people living with chronic disease. This will have an enormous impact on our society in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years if nothing is done.
What are you hearing from people in terms of their experience, commonalities? What are the stories of people with long COVID in Australia right now?
The stories are absolutely devastating. And one of the worst things that comes through is a lack of support from employers and also sometimes from the family and friends of the people who are suffering, a disbelief. These comments that, oh, you're just lazy, you're not trying hard enough. Stop obsessing about it. Stop getting on those Facebook pages. You're just making yourself worse in the head. This narrative that somehow it's psychological, not physiological. That is heartbreaking every time I read that because, Facebook, there's a lot of women who are on Facebook groups, and I certainly noticed that in the long COVID community. And, you see them lamenting, and I cry for them, particularly the women who've got young kids who still have to do the bulk of the caring, the parenting and the housework, whether they're working outside of the house or not, and they're absolutely shattered. But they don't know what's going on in their body. They can't get the medical help. They can't get the understanding they need from their community. It's absolutely crushing for people. The other thing that comes across loud and clear in those groups is, they're wonderfully supportive. I've got the best information from those groups. It's a beautiful community. Is the fact that people have been suffering with this for years and have been trying to get their voices heard since March 2020, 2.5 years. I just don't know how people live like that. And some of them haven't improved very much at all in that time. It's absolutely devastating.
Can you give us a little insight into months down the track? It's been, 6 or 7 months since you were first diagnosed with COVID. What did your day look like today? So you said you wrote a chapter, so I imagine that's a pretty good day. What is a general day looking like for you?
Yeah, today has been a really good day, actually, comparative to the last 6 months. I'm sort of relieved to be able to hopefully meet my book deadline. I'll take you through a usual day. I get up and I meditate for half an hour to get some more oxygen into my blood, to be able to stand up and for my body to move effectively without crashing. Then I'll make myself breakfast and take about 15 different supplements. That takes about half an hour because I'm moving around in a wheelchair and I have to do things very slowly and deep breathe before and after so I don't impact my body too badly. Then I'll lie on the couch and watch some rubbish on Netflix or ABC iView for about an hour to build up my strength again. Then I'll go and work for an hour on the computer, whether it's writing some of my book or reading some emails. Then I'll go and do another meditation or perhaps take a bath or a shower. Bathing and showering are the hardest things because you've physically got to move your body. I've got a really good shower chair now, fortunately. Then I lie down for half an hour to recover from bathing. After that, it takes me about an hour to get lunch ready. I'll cut up vegetables and put them in the oven to roast and usually just make a roast vegetable salad for lunch because it's easy. Making lunch is exhausting, so then I'll lie down for another hour and watch some rubbish on Netflix. I'll try to make any medical appointments I need to go to in the afternoon. So I'll then either get someone to drive me to a medical appointment or go to a medical appointment. They will completely smash me. So then I'll go and lie down and meditate again in the afternoon or do some yin yoga very gently for about 20 minutes. Then hubby and the kids are usually home. They'll make dinner. I'll have dinner with them. That's lovely. But cognitively, having conversations with people is exhausting. So I can do that for about 45 minutes over dinner and while dinner's getting ready. And then I lie down and watch some rubbish on television for another 2 or 3 hours before I pass out and go to sleep. And that's every day.
What's been the psychological toll of that? Because 6, 7 months ago, your life looked completely different. I can't imagine, because one part of your brain would still be going, come on, Tracey, write your book. You can do this. You can do this. Of course you can do this. How have you adjusted to a life that looks so different?
Yeah, this is why my heart breaks for younger people going through this because honestly, I don't mind sitting at home, patting the dog and having a cup of herbal tea. I'm 55. That's cool, But younger people in the prime of their lives, that psychological impact must be absolutely horrific. The way I deal with it mentally is I've done a little bit of gratitude practice because, it's the only way to get through it. The first couple of months were the worst because you're robbed of almost everything that gives you joy in life. And I know that's different for everybody, but whatever gives you joy in life is related to your exertion, whether you love playing music or reading books. I love reading books. I don't have the cognitive energy to read books at the moment. I love exercising for a couple of hours every day. That's usually my mental health support. I can't do that anymore. I can't really catch up with friends maybe once a month. It's just too exhausting. I can't go out for a meal because I'm frightened of catching COVID again. I can't see a movie because the doors are shut and I'd be terrified. So you really have to work very hard mentally on being grateful for the small things that give you joy. I did 5 minutes of gardening this morning. I love my gardening and I haven't been able to do it for 6 months. Today was the first day I was able to do it. So you've just got to find stuff that doesn't exert a lot of energy that makes you smile.
Do you know much about what the impact of getting COVID is again on someone who has long COVID? Does that make you even more terrified of contracting the virus again?
Yeah, the jury's out on that one, unfortunately. It's too early to know. Looking at anecdotal comments from people on the Facebook pages, For some people, it's really hit them bad. They've got long COVID a second time and with different types of symptoms. For some people, they've had it mildly because they got Delta the first time, Omicron the second time, and they found it okay. What a lot of people are saying is that they're trying to get Paxlovid, the antiviral. So if they get COVID after having long COVID, they can take the antiviral, and hopefully that might work to knock any remaining virus out of their system from the first time as well as knocking out the second time. But as you can hear from the kind of language I'm using, here we are at home just making shit up. We just don't know. We're just trying anything.
How do you feel about Australia's, I don't want to use the term apathy, but the fact that if you are going to a doctor's appointment, if you're going grocery shopping, you'll notice that masks are not widespread, that people are travelling again, that there's a sense, if I get it, I get it. What are you going to do? How do you respond to that attitude?
Oh, it's infuriating. I love living in this country. I generally love the she'll be right attitude. I'm from Queensland, right? I'm pretty laid back. I like that stuff. But unfortunately, we're following the American example where it's become an ideological issue. This whole idea of wearing a mask has been tied up with personal freedom. How dare you impact my personal freedom? To which people like me who are sick or immunocompromised would say, well, I would love the freedom to continue living, thank you very much. And I think wearing a mask is a small price to pay for saving someone's life. But it's become so entrenched in the left versus right, people going down the rabbit hole of social media, that there's almost this indignation, this attitude that this is my right. I will not wear a mask regardless of what you say to me. How dare you make this a nanny state? So I think in Australia we've got that combination of we're a bit too laid back about it, and there is also this rump of people who completely reject the idea that they should do anything to help someone else's health.
Because cases are on the rise as we record this. I think Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is calling a national cabinet meeting to make some decisions. As someone with long COVID, are you hoping that there is, whether it's mask mandates, whether it's something as severe as a lockdown again, what would be your opinion on what needs to happen?
I'm really interested in behavioural psychology, and there are a lot of levers that governments, both state and federal, can pull to change human behaviour. For example, there's not even a public information campaign about long COVID, and yet people in Australia have been living with this since March 2020. We will look back on this time in history as an enormous failure of governments at all levels to protect human life. So I would call on governments at every level to, at the very least, start a public information campaign to tell people what long COVID is and where they can go to get help. Then secondly, they need to put more money towards it, towards research and clinics, particularly in rural and regional areas. We know that Indigenous people, particularly in regional areas, had very high rates of COVID-19. Undoubtedly, there'll be a high percentage of people with long COVID, and yet most of the clinics are in metropolitan areas. Any kind of investment governments make now, they will get back tenfold because you will have a healthy workforce that will put money back into the economy. So if they're thinking about it from an economic perspective and looking at the coffers, and they're looking quite dry at the moment, think about the long game. Certainly do it for the sake of human health, but do it for the economy as well if that's what it takes for them to get over the line. There's a lot of things they could be doing to change behaviour, and they simply don't have the will to do it.
Do you feel a bit forgotten as someone who, we talk about COVID case numbers, we talk about hospital admissions, and then there's this limbo. And it does feel as though there's a political incentive not to talk about long COVID, because then we can get the economy kick-started and go out, go to restaurants, it's fine, you'll get better. As someone who is, for lack of a better term, really a victim of that mentality, do you feel forgotten?
Long COVID is definitely an invisible illness, and we have been deliberately forgotten. You've hit the nail on the head. There is too much financial incentive for governments, for business, even for the medical sector, just to say this isn't happening. We've got other issues. We've got other more pressing problems. It's also a numbers game. I understand why people want to get back to their lives. And if they're not struck by long COVID, I totally get it. Gosh, if I wasn't, I'd be one of those, out there wanting to get out amongst it. The lockdowns were incredibly difficult and arduous and did impact people's mental health along with COVID. So I understand why people don't want to do anything about it. But when you look at the big picture, the impact this will have on society if we don't do something will be catastrophic.
The last thing I wanted to ask you was about the listeners who think they might have long COVID, who are in the aftermath and who do not know where to start. What are the signs they should look out for, and where do they begin in terms of getting the help they need?
Oh, such an important question. Thank you. Look, if you've had COVID and you feel like you might have recovered a little bit in the weeks or month after, that's fantastic. But keep an eye out after that for any of these signs, any unexplained chest pain or palpitations, whether standing up or lying down, any unusual feeling of sickness or exhaustion. And they call it fatigue, but it's more than tiredness. You actually feel coldy and fluey again, and you think you're coming down with something, but it's the old COVID symptoms coming back as part of long COVID. So whatever you had the first time, keep an eye out for that coming back, because it's more than tiredness, it's sickness. Keep an eye out for tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, also sinusitis and rhinitis. So anything like hay fever symptoms, that can be your long COVID feeling like it's coming back again. They're the main things. The other unusual symptom I had early on in my long COVID journey was cystitis, because the organs that are affected, certainly your lungs, everyone knows that, your heart, your kidneys are really badly affected as well. So if you have anything that affects your kidneys or your digestive system, any of your allergies start playing up again. You feel like you might start being allergic to gluten or sugar or something you were never allergic to before. That's mast cell activation syndrome, and that's part of long COVID. So anything unusual, really keep an eye out for it. Do some researching on the long COVID Facebook pages. One of the wonderful women there has started up a list of GPs who understand long COVID around Australia. So find a good GP who understands it. Try to get yourself to a long COVID clinic. Often people drop out at the last minute and you might not have to wait a long time. Just get the help you need and understand that you're not alone. There are people who want to help you and support you. We're here for you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of No Filter. If you want to hear more stories of people with long COVID, listen to our daily news show, The Quickie. There's a link in the show notes. This episode of No Filter was produced by Gia Moylan, and the executive producer is Eliza Ratliff. And I'm Jessie Stevens. Big thanks to anyone listening who has become a Mamamia subscriber. Subscribers get access to every podcast, exclusive videos, and all the great articles on Mamamia. For more information, there's a link in our show notes.